Hello guys, and welcome back to HJW Gaming and my next season update. It's around almost 2 weeks into the server now. I think it's around 10 days, so I thought I'd bring you another update just to see how the season is going. So I'll open up by just taking a look at the map and kind of talking through how the map has changed over time. So you will see we have relocated over into the Eriador region, and as Arnor we have taken the majority of the western side of the map without pushing far, at least, into any of the other factions' lands as of yet. We haven't pushed into Linden's land, save for a few Shire Protector camps. Arnor we've moved up into Ferobwaith, but only to take control up here and ward off the threat of another fellowship, which we'll talk through in the future. And you see, we also haven't pushed south into Rohan at all and taken none of the passes there. So I'll start by talking through our main region. Last time you saw us, we were down in West Tower Lower following day one and our farming. Since then, obviously, we've moved around quite a bit, pushed out, obviously expanded our resources. One of the first things we did was take this pass up here, the pass into the Eriador region, of course, looking for the higher power tiles. As the spawn region only contains 200 and 230 power tiles, so we do need something bigger, 260 plus, in order to get the better scrolls. So we made that our priority to move outwards, and we also needed to look towards the middle of the map, as moving from west to east can be quite difficult, as you do have limited options, particularly starting in the Eisen area, as Arnor now does. You're pretty much limited now to going south through the Rohan region, up past Edoras and through Dunferin and Paths of the Dead. The problem is, of course, Paths of the Dead now have collision mechanics, so you'll find that you end up losing a hell of a lot of soldiers just clashing into your own team. So we pretty much wrote this off straight away, and that meant that the only other route we could go was north through Eriador, which leaves you with the two paths straight across here into Caras Galadhon, or continuing pushing up north, going through another pass into Angmar's region, and then going through the North Pass and then coming back south again. So, of course, the option we chose was to try and come through one of the two passes in Eriador. Now, whilst it might look straightforward and like we just flown through, it was absolutely nothing of the sort. So you'll see that Lothlorien currently owns this pass. So Lothlorien's story right from the beginning was they moved immediately, almost as quickly as possible, south towards us and through the middle region. So they took, I think it was this pass, very early on, and then pushed, I think it was around the same time we moved into Eriador, took this pass, and then moved to take the pass also into southern Anduin Vale. They took this very, very quickly, and credit to them, they then moved extremely swiftly and moved over to Caras Galadhon, where they then took that, which is unfortunate, as we had actually planned to take the southern pass here. And on the same day that we planned to take it, I don't know if there was an information leak or similar, they decided, at quite an early time as well, an unusual time for their sieges based on what happened the previous days, they decided to take Caras Galadhon and gain access to the region, and immediately fought it up around the two passes, particularly the southern one that we were preparing to hit. So whether there was an information leak or not, or whether it was just coincidence, they did move extremely quickly suddenly to cut us off here at the exact time that we were there. Now, I do have a couple of clips of this, but I did miss the final hit. But basically, we were a little bit slow in setting up, and we tried to accelerate our plans based on the Lothlorien movements, and it did take us quite a long time to come through and hit the pass. And unfortunately, by then, they were very set up. It did actually take us 2 attempts to try and get it as well. So on the second attempt, they were set up well by then, and they had plenty of siege armies sat down here. And of course, naturally, the march across here is, I think it's about 4 minutes. If you're in one of the forts back here, it's more like 5 or 6. With that enormous march time, it was very simple for them to just unleash a wave of siege armies right at the end and snipe the pass from us. So unfortunately, we didn't take this pass, and of course then had Lothlorien bearing down on us. And they bought themselves time to relocate themselves into the Caras Galadhon area. We did defend our side of the tunnel, so they weren't able to push any further towards us, but it also meant that we would have to fight and contend with their armies prior to us taking the pass. So we then looked north towards the second pass and our second bite of the cherry. Unfortunately, pretty much the exact same thing happened. We did have the pass sniped from underneath us for the second time, which was obviously a big blow to our hopes and left us sat behind two different passes. The only good thing here is that the march time from this one is about 2 minutes, so a lot less, but the downside, of course, being that there's very limited space for forts and fortresses, so there wasn't a huge amount that we could stack up. Other people were having 6 or 7 minute marches from the other side of this tunnel here in the Eriador region, which you can see that we are located next to as we prepared for that movement. So we kind of just built up here and we're ready and waiting to take it, which you can see we have since done. But I guess at this point it's probably best to talk through other factions' movements, as it brings kind of good context to the movement of this server. Now, early on, Rune and Erebor actually had a little bit of a spar. Rune tried to take this pass, and Erebor actually successfully sniped it from them. Despite the pass being on Rune's side, they timed their siege perfectly and did snipe the pass from them and made a little bit of a push into Rune lands. After that, Rune then retook the pass, I think it was the next day, and have obviously, as you can see, pushed into Erebor's lands, kind of in retaliation, which is unsurprising. If you see the fellowship, the leaderboard power rankings, I'm going to give a little bit of a spoiler here as to where we're sat, but you'll see that Rune is obviously sat in 4th and 7th, whereas Erebor's first fellowship appears at number 11, so the power difference is pretty large. So Rune have since pushed and taken all the land in the Erebor area and have expanded well. You see they've also slightly expanded south into the Mordor region as well, with Mordor being pretty much empty in this server. We kind of previously discussed in the first video. If you haven't seen that already, please have a flick back. But we did discuss the kind of power rankings of the various teams and the way that the 4 most powerful teams are quite bizarrely separated by smaller, weaker factions in between. So there's almost always empty land in between the two of them, which of course meant we were always going to all meet in the middle, as you can see has happened here. Gondor, however, so they've partly pushed, as you can see, through the Black Gate to get farmlands in Mordor. As I said, it's empty, but primarily they pushed north and through also up into the central region. From the perspective of Arnor, we thought this was strange, as Lothlorien had pushed straight through the pass and immediately come to cut us off. However, we did know, of course, at other passes where Gondor was setting up, there was absolutely no presence at all from Lothlorien. They were not setting up at all to cut off and stop Gondor, which led us to think that Gondor and Arnor were in alliance. So we were obviously slightly concerned with two factions moving in our direction, so we had slight concerns. We didn't want to end up kind of stuck on this western side of the map and fighting for our lives against two of the strongest factions. Of course, we were talking with Gondor at least, along with Rune and keeping up with the other factions, but everyone was non-committal, at least on alliances at that point. However, there did come a point, where we were speaking with Gondor and they agreed to our agreements, or at least our terms of agreement, and we agreed to their terms as well, in order for us to become allied. Now, there's differing accounts of what happened here, however, as Lothlorians say they didn't block Gondor, as they felt they already had an alliance agreement with Gondor, and they now believe Gondor to be traitors against them, and obviously were then caught in the middle, sandwiched between the two of us. They feel like Gondor betrayed them, that they already had an agreement in place, and Gondor didn't respect that. Gondor's opinion, however, from what I've heard, is that the agreement wasn't set in stone, it hadn't been kind of ratified and agreed, and that Lothlorien was making kind of demands at the last minute, particularly restrictions towards where they could farm, where they could access. As of course, Lothlorien being first in the middle, Gondor felt that Lothlorien, were trying to prevent Gondor from getting into the middle, which made, from their perspective, that kind of agreement void, as they were getting restricted heavily as to where they were kind of allowed to go, which they felt like they were the stronger faction and so shouldn't be told where they can and can't go. If I haven't got that correct, apologies, feel free to correct me in the comments, but that's the two different sides from what I've heard from various leaders and players of the two different factions. So that created obviously tension between the two, and therefore Gondor allied with us. which then meant Lothlorien was stuck between a rock and a hard place and had to also move to defend Gondor. What that allowed us to do is, whilst Lothlorien were elsewhere, we then pushed this pass. It wasn't as easy as it sounds as that, as they did have some of their strongest bases on here. For example, they had their leader, Sir Kobe Phoenix, here. They had a player called Demir. Very, very strong players located in these areas who put in an absolute shift to try and defend this area. They'd also relocated most of their keeps around Caras Galadhon, so they had a bunch of keeps here, all with fairly short reinforced times all the way up to the crossing. So they were putting in a great shift to try and stop us, but unfortunately, with divided attention, they weren't able to hold us, and we did manage to get it just about within the hour. So we did pick up the pass, and that allowed us to flood into Caras Galadhon, move, and we've recently taken the area over the last few days. So we now have one of the central ring regions. Gondor, of course, have carried on pushing Lothlorien as well, and have since taken the Undeeps, which was neutral, and as of today have taken southern Anduin Vale from them. So today is, at time of recording, it is Wednesday. Now, to make matters worse for Lothlorien in this situation, as they felt like an ally was coming in Gondor, or at least in their opinion, they had the agreement with Gondor. As I said, they feel like Gondor betrayed them, so they thought they already had an ally in Gondor. During that time, Rune were messaging to try and strike up some form of friendship or alliance as well, and just kind of get a gauge. Of course, they're very near kind of neighbouring factions, so they wanted to speak to them as well. However, they felt like they were being ignored by Lothlorien and weren't being respected by them. So at the time when Gondor then allied with us, of course, Lothlorien had to turn towards Rune, but Rune had felt disrespected by Lothlorien, which of course then causes the problem of, it's hard to strike up alliances. So I think they discussed for about 2 days to try and get an alliance in place, understanding it was needed for kind of survival, particularly for Lothlorien at that time. But then for some reason, negotiations seemed to break down, and we did notice that we were surprised because Lothlorien were not fighting us, and it turns out they'd set a fortress at East Bite and also passes around the Rune areas. And they took this region and have started aggressively pushing Rune. You'll notice they've taken passes in Mirkwood and also the pass down here as well in Dorwinion. So they are now also openly attacking against Rune as well, whilst being, pushed upon by Gondor and ourselves. So Lothlorien have now left themselves in a position where they kind of don't have any allies currently, and are kind of trying to fight the whole server, which isn't ideal, obviously, for them. And there's kind of differing opinions as to how that came about, but that's the position they found themselves in. Rune, similarly, have found themselves in a position where they had a border agreement with Gondor, so Gondor wouldn't push into their regions, they wouldn't push into Gondor's, which I think is kind of where the difficulty with Lothlorien lied, in that Rune didn't want to push Gondor without kind of severing that agreement and having everything in place. But didn't want to just straight up betray. And Lothlorien didn't particularly like that, as far as I'm aware. So that led to kind of differences between the two factions. So Rune are just kind of, they're left with a friendship with Gondor that I wouldn't say they're kind of, as far as I'm aware, I don't think they're in alliance as well. They certainly aren't with us in Arnor. But they're left at war with Lothlorien and at war with the remains of Erebor. So that's led to the map of how, as we are now. You can see, actually, Angmar is reasonably active. They've taken a couple of keeps as well, but mainly keep themselves to themselves. And that's how we've ended up with this map here. I've included footage of most major events, so hopefully that's helped. Quick run through of my commanders. We have had, as you can imagine, a levelling spree, but without a huge amount of PvP, other than early with Lothlorien. We haven't seen a massive amount of levels. And a lot of the time, I'm not going to lie, we have been getting absolutely smashed by some very high, very welled commanders, as I said, particularly a lot of the Gondor players and also the Lothlorien players who are the remains of only. They have very high Zenith level commanders, so we haven't been winning as many as we would like. So we haven't got as much experience as we would like, but we have got 2 up to 41 and 2 commanders sat at 40. We've levelled our second team up, so we have 2 at 40. And you can see you've got kind of a range of commander levels here from various different farming. But the primary thing we need to do now is get some PvP in and get levelling our commanders and improving our merit. hopefully you guys have enjoyed that kind of talk through of the server. I hope to bring you more videos kind of showing off PvP and that in the future. At the minute when there is a big war, I will show it. At the minute there's not a huge amount to show, so I will just do the kind of politics update. If you guys have enjoyed, please drop a like on the server. If you're playing the server, drop a comment and just let me know which faction you're in and what your kind of opinions of everything that's gone on are, and I would really appreciate that. Anyway, with that, I've been HJW Gaming, and I really hope to see you guys in the next one.